Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3. Hello, hello, hello. Sorry for some delay there. I'm just testing the audio. Okay, sounds really fine on here, so that's good. Um, as the title says, as the title says, Damn Good Coffee Time is back. So please adjust your settings accordingly. So please adjust your settings accordingly. So please adjust your settings. Yes. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Testing. So please adjust your settings. 1 2 3. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Yeah. Testing. So please adjust your settings. 1 2 3. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Yeah. Testing. Please adjust your settings. 1 2 3. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Yeah. Testing. Please adjust your settings. 1 2 3. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Yeah. Testing. Please adjust your settings. 1 2 3. Please adjust your settings accordingly. Yeah. Testing. Please adjust your settings. So yes, this is Damn Good Coffee Time live and unleashed on you again after a quiet period, shall we say. And I think really, the main thing you should be doing if you're watching now or tuned in and watching Damn Good Coffee Time, then I think the thing we really need to do is to go and make yourself a damn good cup of coffee. And that's just what I'm going to do. So I'll be back and see if anyone else out there joins us in the meantime. But yeah, please tell everyone we're now live. I'll be back momentarily. Hello. Testing again. This is James on Damn Good Coffee Time. If anyone's watching at the moment, please feel free to say hello and just tell me if the sound's okay for you as well. I was having some sound problems on a different kind of setup. So anyway, hopefully it's still working fine on here. So the only problem will be my voice sounding a little bit croaky or something, but maybe if I just keep talking a bit, that'll improve. Anyway, we're now into July, and I've not done many videos recently, really. There's one I tried with John, but anyway, having been to see 28 Years Later, I thought I'd do a video just to mention my views on that, straight out of the cinema for you. Well, I actually went to see it in the week on Thursday. So directed by Danny Boyle. 28 Years Later is a follow-on from 28 Days Later. I'm not sure if it's officially a sequel to that or 28 Weeks Later. 28 Weeks Later was described by Mark Kermode as being a sort of just standalone, separate film. For some reason, he described it as that, because it has a different director. I don't know really why he described it as that, because it seems pretty clearly to be a sequel to the first one. But anyway, this is a sequel to those two films, I guess. If anything, it's probably more so a standalone new entry in this series of films, in that it doesn't really it's not exactly a straight ahead follow on from either of them. I mean, really, just bearing in mind the first one is directed by Danny Boyle. It's not in the same style as that first film, or in terms of the storyline and just the way it, the style of making and everything. So it doesn't really, I mean, pleasingly for me, it's not a straight ahead follow up that just ticks all of the boxes that might be expected from a studio, film that's trying to appeal to the audience of the original film, which of course has been made very well available through streaming sources. The first one I'm talking about, it's on BBC iPlayer, and no doubt other places more visibly since this one was released, or prior to its release, really, sort of both acting as a promo, really, and just because obviously these different stations or streaming services see, that there's going to be general public interest in this series of films. Anyway, I would say, for me, as I mentioned, it's pleasingly different to the first film. in that it's not really, does it really fulfill the criteria of a zombie fan who just wants to see fast running zombies chasing after people like in the first film? Even though I would say the films focus more so on the characters in them than the zombies, perhaps as a whole. Talking about the first one and this third one, but at the same time, I would say that this film is pretty different to the first 28 Days Later in its style and general shape. The way it progresses. The first film is set from Cillian Murphy's perspective of him waking up in a hospital, and he doesn't know where everyone is. Everywhere's empty. The streets are empty when he goes outside. The first thing noticeable about 28 Days Later now, especially, and even at the time, was just how lo-fi it looks in terms of the resolution of the picture, and clearly that being a result of the camera that was used to film it. I'll just look that up now. It's just worth mentioning, really. 28 Days Later, camera used. 28 Days Later was primarily filmed using Canon XL1 digital video cameras, known for their standard definition resolution and mini DV tape recording. 8mm for some flashback sequences, and 35mm film for the final scene, which is instantly noticeable. But I would say, all things considered, that they probably degraded the look, even for it being shot on digital video cameras, etc., to make it look even rougher. And I suppose maybe at the time it might not have been quite so noticeably poor quality in terms of the picture, because obviously that was back in 2002 or so, and I never saw it in the cinema, but even on the BBC iPlayer, the picture quality doesn't look very good. To me, it looked like too much of a poor quality, really, to warranted for the film itself. It seemed unnecessarily downgraded to make it give it that kind of gritty look, or whatever the idea was. It could easily have been a few notches higher in terms of the resolution, I think. I don't know if if it was the particular transfer or what. I don't know, because I didn't notice it looking as bad as that before when I'd seen it, no doubt probably on DVD back in the day. But yeah, I mean, to go into talking more about 28 Years Later, it's from the beginning, it's certainly got its own visual aesthetic, which is not necessarily the best quality visual that could have been achieved, but I'll type the same thing in for 28 Years Later. 28 Years Later. Camera used. So yeah, I think actually Kevin told me that it was filmed on iPhones. It says here primarily filmed using iPhone 15 Pro and iPhone 15 Pro Max cameras. Traditional cameras and drones were also used. Does feature some traditional cameras and drones. They used a lens adapter to add cinema quality prime, anamorphic, spherical, and zoom lenses to the iPhone. Yeah, I think there was a varied use of different setups and cameras, really, used for 28 years later. From the offset, I thought that it starts in a room in a house with suitably enough, it's a bunch of very blonde-haired young children, all in front of a TV watching Teletubbies, and the mother sort of pops her head in or something to say, ignore what's going on outside, just keep watching the TV. And so there's obviously something going on, something kicking off, and she's trying to keep their attention on Teletubbies. But and the blonde youngsters does tie in with later scene in the film, actually, nicely enough. And in that scene, I thought that the shots used there, very sort of wide anamorphic lens for the children all sat there. It was really good. It looked visually impressive, and immediately, drew you into the film. But I did think that it had a haziness to it. It almost looked a little bit like turn the brightness down slightly on this shot, but so there was that kind of effect, that I thought, I don't know, they tend to go for certain effects to give this kind of a film. Again, they're going for they're not trying to hide the fact that it was filmed using iPhones, in terms of the drawbacks of using such a device to film the whole thing. The limitations, I mean, whilst, I think, they could have made it look probably somewhat more perfect in terms of the image right from the outset. But I would say that some scenes, it kind of has a rougher edged feel to it than others, for sure. Throughout it, there are certain scenes where it becomes far more lush, and sort of there's an element of some visual trickery in certain parts, some digital work going on, and CGI or overlaying different shots with where they're up on there's quite a few shots where they're up on hills or on the side of a hill, a hillside, and they're walking along the side of it in silhouette or standing there, looking out over the landscape, which I thought those scenes worked really well, and they had they would be in some of those bits they were using an effect where they had, you know, a different a background into the distance of the viewpoint that was showing over the, you know, the landscape that was somehow underlaid or overlaid, you know, for that. But it worked really well and looked really good. I mean, I'm just talking mainly about the visuals of the film so far. I think my main point being as well that if people wanted just a straight ahead zombie film follow up to 28 days later, then I'm not sure that this really would entirely fulfill what they were looking for, that kind of audience. It's almost it's within that setting, you know, the zombie setting of the first one, but it's far more interested really in the son and the Jodie Comer character playing his mother, who it follows for the majority of the film, really. The father is played by the actor from Kick-Ass, Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's in the initial part of the film with the son, and he's more he's like a sort of self-sufficient, you know, learning, you know, survivalist, and he takes his son out with bows and arrows across a causeway into the main part of the UK, which is all quarantined, and they're living off in an island which is self-sufficient and free from the virus, you know, from the zombies, and has a big wall around it and defenses, etc. So, you know, they go in with bows and arrows, though, which is a pretty basic form of defense, but he's trying to teach his son how to use them. His son's quite young, like, I don't know, 12, something like that. And the mother is ill with an unspecified illness. Anyway, I won't go into everything about the film, you know, every little detail. But I think, as a most part, the film succeeded for me in terms of being a study of the mother and the son, and then them eventually coming into contact with the Ralph Fiennes character. And there were very noticeable sort of shifts in the film. I would say it's almost like 3 parts. And whilst, say, maybe the first part is quite straight ahead, then as soon as it focuses on the mother and the son and their journey, it becomes a little bit more of a not a fever dream entirely, but it certainly has elements of strangeness in and throughout it. For sure, you know, absolutely, especially considering the Ralph Fiennes character. And then perhaps we're getting different elements or perspectives of either from the father, the son, and the mother as well throughout it. And it's also more of just a mood piece concerning mainly the mother and the son, with her being ill, for instance, you know, seriously ill. I think it's quite a decent sort of capsule of that and mood piece, really. That part of the film was the most successful for me, at least. But I mean, there are many other parts of it which are really just survival horror, you know, which overall I would say are, you know, not as interesting not as interesting in comparison to the mother and son part of the film. Because, we've seen so many zombie films, and now that they're TV shows like obviously The Walking Dead and its many different iterations, and then there's the Last of Us, no doubt other zombie TV shows and films. It's really just so commonplace now, I think, and I don't know, can anyone do it better than George A. Romero anyway? I'm not really sure. And then, but nonetheless, it's still an interesting enough entry, even if it feels perhaps a bit disconnected between each part of the film or each aspect of the film, and wondering whose perspective are we seeing this from, really. And I would imagine that aspect of it is debatable, but great to see your comment as well, Louis B. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It'd be good to get a few people back in the chat now, and seeing that I'm live now, but doing a video again. But I think my slightly croaky voice is sort of summing up the general croakiness or creakiness of getting back into gear with it, but that's to be expected. So I appreciate anyone who might watch now, but of course, if you've been watching anything lately and anything you want to talk about, of course, Louis, hope I'm saying your name right, but just bring it up in the chat and I'll talk about it for a bit. Obviously, I'm not going to go on for 4 hours now. Maybe I would if I had a few other people on, but let's just talk about anything that comes to mind, really. I think basically what has it got it going for it, this 28 years later? Basically, the fact that it doesn't, it's not just a totally by the book zombie flick follow on. Cillian Murphy's not in this one. He's apparently in the next one, which is due for release next January. So either it's just all been filmed back to back or simultaneously. So, not simultaneously. That's be a bit much. Who knows, though? I mean, this fourth one in the series has got a different director. It's not Danny Boyle. He's stepped aside for that one, but then there is a promised possible fifth film, which will be directed by Danny Boyle again. In terms of box office, I don't really think there's going to be anything flopping in this series of films from what's happened already. This one seems to have done pretty well at the box office so far. And then in terms of streaming and everything like that, that's probably going to be its main, where it really gets a lot of people watching. And I would dare to say it's a little bit almost more suited to home viewing than, even though, it's visually pretty interesting as a film. I wouldn't really say it's a necessity to go and see 28 years later on an IMAX cinema or an immense screen, to improve the experience in particular. I mean, that sounds a little bit negative about the cinema experience, considering I went to the cinema to see it, but I got well absorbed into the film through the cinema experience still. But I think that's something you can get at home just as much in something that's well made. And I mean, really, I suppose Jodie Comer, she's she's pretty much is able to capture a viewer with her performances in anything I've seen, really. And she does so in this one, even though she's really just playing someone quite sick throughout it. Although sporadically she seems to have moments where she's worked well enough. But yeah, anyway, it's an interesting continuation, and it kind of has the feel of Danny Boyle sort of coming back to it and saying, okay, we'll carry on this series of films, but I sort of want to do something a bit different. But but at the same time, it has quite a widescreen, relatively epic feel to it. I don't know, full epic, but it's because these films by necessity have to have something of a claustrophobic feel to them. There are a few epic shots and things like that in there, which are good. But yeah, it's kind of like Danny Boyle trying to balance. I want to do something a bit different and come up with a few new ideas, and maybe not always take the material entirely seriously, even, which is welcome as well. Some of the little more comical aspects, although I wouldn't say the film overall is very comical, but there is comedy in there. And in terms of its sporadic or in rather random moments, uneven qualities, they're obviously something which is where Danny Boyle is sort of doing his own thing and bringing something a bit new to it. The uneven tone, you could describe it as, is very much a directorial choice, and it's not just deliberate. It's not like, okay, we've accidentally edited a bit of the film out here, so it's got an uneven tone. I just think it's good that Danny Boyle was trying to at least come in with something a bit new, take the direction a little bit somewhere unexpected. Will Graham, good to see you, of course. Nice to have a full lengthy comment there. And another one from Louis. Hi, James. I liked how weird the film was. I know Danny Boyle is a big Nick Roeg fan, which you can tell from his editing, and I noticed he used music from Eureka when they're running along the causeway. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've got a bit of a Twin Peaks crossover discussion there as well, probably, because in terms of Nick Roeg's editing, on Don't Look Now, who is the editor on that? Graham Clifford, who Don't Look Now editor is Graham Clifford. Graham Clifford, did he direct a Twin Peaks episode? I believe maybe, I think so, yeah. Let me just check anyway. Director. Yeah, he did direct one episode of Twin Peaks. Also known for Gleaming the Cube, and a film which is almost impossible to find, Frances, with Jessica Lange, who playing Frances Farmer, who had a difficult life with mental illness and being blacklisted in Hollywood. So it was quite a life she had. And it's a really good film, actually, Frances. I managed to find it, and I highly recommend that film. Very, along the lines of the sort of Goddess book or the interest in Marilyn Monroe that Lynch and Frost had. And then Lynch has said, anything to do with Marilyn Monroe is a major influence on him, from Laura Palmer to Mulholland Drive. And I think, Francis would have been an influence there as well, the film. There was a host of these different directors, who all were around at the same time as Lynch and Frost, and I suppose they're all influenced each other to some degree. Yeah, I mean, the film was. I wouldn't say it was like overly weird throughout. It was sort of. It was a bit fantastical at times, and yeah, it had some unusual qualities, even from the the chubby zombies crawling along the floor and stuff was a sort of the complete opposite of what we would expect from the fast running zombies, of course. So, and it's like it's showing how really you can have a degree of horror or thriller aspect from such beings, zombie variations. You don't have to have them just running and grabbing people by the neck with big loads of blood squirting everywhere and stuff. So Louis B. Yeah, I mean there are other elements in the film, especially the ending, which is where it kind of really does go weird because it's just so disjointed, and then almost a hilarious segment at the end, but it's very brief, and I'd heard about it already. People had mentioned it to me. Well, yeah, I'm talking about that now, Will. So I don't want to just go into detail about the ending too much, because I'd rather recommend it to people and they go out and see it. But with the viewers here, it's hardly 6 people now viewing. Is it really necessary to be bothered about spoilers? Not really. Sorry about my slightly croaky voice, but don't know why that is exactly. It's probably hay fever. Well, of course, we have Jack O'Connell, Derby resident, or was, very good actor, appearing at the end alongside his crew, wearing these blonde wigs that look like something I used to wear on coffee time, bought from a fancy dress shop called Love Your Babes, or online or whatever. And I mean, they've got jewelry all over them, and the leader of the gang is called Jimmy, and they do seem a bit modeled after Jimmy Savile. So that in itself is certainly weird enough and pretty crazy, all things considered. I think I don't really know if there's something about the fact that we see them watching the Teletubbies at the start of the film, and from whichever point, if the virus took hold in 2002 in the original film, 28 days later, then people would never have been. First of all, Teletubbies was on from the 90s, I suppose. So either it's being repeated on TV from then, old episodes of Teletubbies, or they've got it on DVD or video or whatever. But if the virus had took hold in 2002, then the investigation and the reveal about, the knowledge of the full, sick exploits of Jimmy Savile would not have been revealed to the nation. Because, obviously a zombie outbreak is probably, it's definitely more important in the scheme of things. even though there is a sickness about both of them. And it's an interesting aspect to bring into the film. And when you think about it, I mean, I don't know how much of it would be like actually covered in the next one or anything like that, this Jimmy Savile influence. Then both are a kind of a sickness infiltrating the youth and, the zombie outbreak and Jimmy Savile in a sense. So there might be some aspect there that could be discussed. Nonetheless, this adopting the look of Jimmy Savile may have been an entirely innocent thing from the context of the film. I don't know. Louis says the only thing I've watched recently was Pink Floyd's Live at Pompeii. I'm intending on going to see the new Wes Anderson film this week. Well, you must be a big Pink Floyd fan then, I would imagine. So I've never watched the entire concert of that. I imagine the recording must be great because it's so well known, that live concert. Maybe it's considered one of the best live recordings of a band. I don't know, because of course it was filmed without an audience, so it was just them playing live. But I had a friend when I was at school who had a video of that and would watch it. He was a big Pink Floyd fan. The only Pink Floyd album that I'm familiar with is Wish You Were Here, which I did put onto my old, I remember, I had it on an iPhone, an iTunes Shuffle, those really small ones where you just skip forward. The only buttons would be skip forward and back, as basic as it comes, but very good little device. I don't know why Apple has stopped making those and the other iTunes devices. Hello, Phantom Cooper. I'm all right, thanks, and I hope you're all right. Yeah, I mean, to talk again about the ending of 28 Years Later, I'd say I kind of, obviously, I knew people had already mentioned it who have already seen it to me, like Kevin, but I didn't really. I only heard people mention Power Rangers. Is that the music from Power Rangers playing when they sort of jump into action from off this cliffside, sort of? I appreciated it as an ending just because it was completely unrelated to anything that would come before. And it had this aspect of, the film already went into some degree of ridiculousness with the son taking away his mother and then coming back with her skull. That was a bit far-fetched for me. It's just seems a bit abrupt. But I think it was shown in that kind of way deliberately, in terms of youngsters sort of process grief and having to go through that kind of a situation differently. I think their perception of things can be quite abrupt as well, and they will just possibly shift into seeming normalcy for them, which of course it might not be the best thing for their they're maturing, to go from their mother dying into something else, whatever they're up to in life. They need to process it and everything, but maybe the ending is a bit of a sudden shift into the sort of perspective of the young boy, in the sense of his sort of perception trying to, or his mind trying to just adjust to whatever comes next. And so there's this just sudden shift in focus from a very solemn whole segment and sadness, and him mourning. I mean, really, we don't see any mourning, so it's just like that's excised and then just on to the next bit, and it's just deliberately crazy. Partly because maybe we are supposed to perceive this gang who suddenly arrive as being crazy, obviously, but something to do with his perception of it could be part of that as well. And I'll be interested to see how the next film portrays it all, really. I mean, you could understand how a young boy who's lost his mother may be keen to sort of become part of some kind of gang like that, fighting against the zombies. But yeah, the only thing really that stood out for me about the ending was, I mean, alongside me, I enjoyed it as an ending, but I thought, okay, this is very clearly, just setting up the next film. So for anyone who went to see the film and they didn't know that there were going to be another one, two planned films after this, so it's a trilogy, if they didn't know about that, then they would obviously be a bit surprised by the ending, thinking, what the hell's going off here, But nonetheless, if I'd not known anything about whether there were films planned after this, I still would have enjoyed it as an ending. And I would have, if I didn't know anything, then I would have assumed that this will be continued, without there being to be continued at the end of the film, which doesn't happen. I think I watched it to the I did watch it to the very end of the credits. I was just enjoying the music. Shots. It was interesting in a way how the end credits had shots from the film in order, really, just very brief shots through, going from black to the black of the credits to sudden interspersed interruptions from the rest of the film, which I suppose it's just a stylistic thing, but I'm not really sure if there's anything meant by that. But the film did have a surreal feeling to it, and something of a feverish sort of, how much of this can we really assume is actually entirely as it happened? It has a sort of surrealistic, slightly fantastical, everything turned up to 11 at times, like an exaggerated quality to it, but which is in contrast in a way to, say, the first film, which is going for, you take this as if it's real, as if you're seeing something which is actually happening, an outbreak in London, in the British Isles, and this is not to be scoffed at. This is a serious horror film for you. It's a different approach, which I can imagine there would be some people who would find it
you know, they'd be a bit kind of like thinking maybe it could have been a bit more straightforward, I suppose, for their like taste. I don't know. Pacing wise, you know, it has its slow moments, I suppose. So yeah. Nigel Farage making a comeback. I don't know about that really. I mean, I suppose he's generally got some degree of popularity from time and time again, you know, when people are particularly pissed off at whoever is in power. But there's also now, you know, an offshoot of the Labour Party being a new political party being made there. So with Jeremy Corbyn and a woman. So and a woman, that sounds good. So I suppose, you know, if people are fed up with the mainstream parties, then this is the kind of thing is inevitable. I mean, in terms of Nigel Farage as a person, I'm not a fan myself. Just a bit of a nauseating character, really. But some people seem to like him for some reason. I don't know. Hello, Davrin, and saw the flick at the cinema yesterday. It was all right, but nothing to write home about, really. Nice atmosphere, but a few bothersome plot holes, I'd say. Definitely needs to be continued. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about nothing to write home about. It's not for everyone, really. I just think that it was pleasing at least that Danny Boyle didn't want to just sort of take it in an entirely predictable route. I suppose the first part of the film with the dad and the son learning hunting and things, that's the most sort of expected trope or route that the film would be taking. And then that is interrupted, and then it focuses more on the mother and the boy. I mean, the boy just suddenly throws his dad to the side very rapidly, and where you kind of don't really understand why the sudden shift. I mean, he may have got pissed off with his dad, of course. Doesn't his dad hit him? I think so. Well, I don't know which plot holes or what plot holes you mean exactly. Well, I wasn't aware of plot holes really. I mean, the film is a bit disjointed, but that's like the style of it. So that was an aspect I liked of it. But anyway, what plot holes are me talking about? I'd be interested to hear. So I've kind of got to the point where I've talked enough about 28 years later now, though, really. So if anyone wants to bring up any other topics in the chat, that's good, and that'd be welcome. I'll definitely check out the planned sequels if they materialize. Well, they've definitely made the next one with a different director has already clearly been made because it's due for release next January, is it? January or February? So they must already have pretty much made it. So I don't know, they must have, unless they're doing any reshoots. But I can't imagine that's the case. The conclusion that brings the story full circle with the prologue promises interesting things regarding the potential human baddie. I wonder what happened to Ireland in the 28 years later world. Maybe that would be in the sequels. Well, I don't know about that, Will. I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't really haven't like looked into the released information about these films or anything online, but no doubt it's not very difficult to do so. Cillian Murphy's in the next one. I don't know how much. I think I've vaguely heard that he's probably not in the film a lot. I don't know. Maybe he'll be in it as much as, say, Ralph Fiennes was in this one. Sort of extended cameo, really. Which I'm not really sure why that would be the case. Why can't they just have him in the whole film, or throughout the entire film, really, to rejoin with the original with 28 Days Later? I mean, if it was up to me, I would have got as many as the cast back from the original film in this one, including like Christopher Eccleston and Naomi Harris. Is that a name? And the young girl that they are with. I was watching that the 28 Days Later recently, and on the BBC, and the young girl in it, though, I thought her acting was like, it sounded like she'd been overdubbed, or I couldn't quite. It just seemed really like, not necessarily like awful acting or anything, but it just seemed really like as if she was in a different film from the others. The way she was just voicing her lines, it seemed really sounded like she was in a school play or something. It just kind of came across really awkward. In her initial scenes, at least, but that doesn't mean she should be brought back. There are so many characters in that first film anyway. There's not very many peak characters in it at all, are there? So why not bring as many of them back as possible? So as survivors. Yeah. And Davrin says it was nice to see the saga back in hands of the original creators. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, even though I would say it doesn't really, it wasn't an easy sort of sequel entry in the franchise, if you can call it that. I mean, it is a franchise, I'm sure, but they could easily have gone a more straightforward, simple route for box office success. But the film's done apparently pretty damn well at the box office. So I suppose it might just attract enough people as is, or the trailers looked good enough. I don't know what. I don't know. Enough time has passed since the first one for people to be interested again. The kind of time that needs to be between, much later on sequels for there to be interest. Because with 28 weeks later, I think that the interest had sort of dissolved a little bit. So, nonetheless, regarding, I mean, the film's quality, I don't think 28 years later was. Probably stylistically or just the way it was a bit of a perhaps predictable follow-up, but it looked better quality in terms of the image compared to the first film, and had drone effects in it, for instance. It was Robert Carlyle in that, wasn't it, alongside Imogen Poots and others. So was Jeremy Renner in the second film as well? I mean, it had it was more of a just Hollywoodization of the whole thing a bit, I think, from what I remember of that film. and pretty straight ahead sequel. Mr. Davrin says, it's definitely surprising they bothered with the continuation 20 years after 28 Weeks came out. 23 years after it. So I think there's always nostalgia, and with that much time having passed, it creates a degree of commercial interest as an audience interest in something like that, and gives it a bit more commercial clout because of there's always the nostalgia dollar or pound or whatever currency we're talking, where people remember something from so long ago and then are keen to kind of see it updated. There's always, of course, the worry that something like that is going to be, it's going to seem like just a cash in or lazy or whatever. And so if it gets, a few good reviews, then you've pretty much got a guaranteed audience for it and box office. So yeah, I think Danny Boyle was trying to get the best of both worlds by experimenting to some extent in this film, but for the most part, I mean, it's not a terribly experimental film, but it certainly had enough in it to interest me. So where's the control? Oh, right. Sorry, I just lost the remote control for something here. It's squashed under my leg. All right. What did you make of Sinners if you saw it? I really enjoyed it. Doesn't really sustain all the comparisons with From Dusk Till Dawn, but nice original tale that stands on its own feet. Well, I saw it in the cinema. I mean, in terms of its visuals, it was well filmed. Overall, I mean, for me, I can't say I particularly rated it that much, but maybe I'm just not, I'm not really the kind of audience or the kind of person who would really appreciate it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, it had a degree of vampire action in it, but it was quite minimal, I thought. I couldn't quite understand the high praise for the film, really, from my perspective anyway. I mean, I have read a few other people saying the same, but if other people enjoyed it, then, I'm happy that they did. So, and it certainly did very, very well at the box office, I believe. Oh. I don't really have anything else much to talk about right now. So if anybody else wanted to mention anything to discuss in a comment or two, then I could continue into that. Would be good of you. But I just thought I'd mention that actually, like around the time of when the media covered Lynch's death, sort of at the end of January or so, or middle to end of January, up on the recommended viewing or next up for you on my Amazon Fire Stick. It came up with the film The Believers, which is from, I believe, 1987. It has Martin Sheen in it, and it's based on a script adapted from a novel by the adaptation is by Mark Frost. One of the first scenes in the film is where his wife is electrocuted by and killed by a coffee machine just by touching it in an apparent freak accident. And this is, bear in mind, this is before Lynch and Frost joined forces as such and wrote anything. I mean, maybe they knew each other in 1987, but I think they already knew each other. But certainly a very Lynchian moment, but not with any involvement from Lynch. So it shows how well suited Frost and Lynch were, really. Just struck me, like, why is this appearing up as next up for you when in the wake of the news about Lynch? Is this just coincidence, or who is like programming these films, and why is this film now easily available? So maybe it's just interesting Mark Frost now a bit, from someone somewhere. But now when I go into the recommended films and things like this, it's I'll just show you the TV screen a bit, I think. All right, good angle there. There we go. So yeah, if I just go across next up for you on here. Hello there, Charlotte, in the chat. So yeah, if I scroll across for next up for you now, I only have to scroll across a few things here. A lot of things which I've seen, for instance, or obviously I've seen Heat, seen The Longer Friday, Copycat, The Dead Zone. Then anyway, it comes up with Storyville. So, and I've never noticed this on Amazon Prime before. This is the directorial feature film debut, I suppose, from Mark Frost, 1992. James Spader, John Worley, Jason Robards. I can remember at the time watching this on video, I think, and not being too besotted with it. It was probably a bit too, slightly too involved or intellectual for me, really, at the time. But if I watched it now, I might enjoy it somewhat. I don't know, because I did watch The Believers, or most of it, and thought it was pretty good. In fact, very good if you're a fan of Frost and Twin Peaks and Lynch, really. It's in The Believers, and it comes up here like Mark Frost, director, obviously showed Twin Peaks, Believers, Storyville, and Hill Street Blues. So The Believers, in terms of the storyline, you could kind of see where there may be elements of it which influenced Frost and Lynch in terms of Twin Peaks, with I suppose it's just an detective investigative thriller type of thing. The Martin Sheen character is a psychiatrist or psychologist in it, psychiatrist, I think. Oh, he's a psychologist, he says it. And basically, it involves a religious sort of cult. And it's sort of a little bit, like predictable sort of voodoo type stuff. And there's one of the characters is like a black guy who's blind. But I think actually he pretends to be blind as part of some kind of, con that he's got going, and he puts in these white eye lenses, So it just reminded me a bit of the Calvin Lockhart character in Twin Peaks, the guy who says "animal life" who plays the electrician in the above the convenience store scene. Anyway, he doesn't really do much in the final cut of Firewalk with Me, but you can see him more in the deleted scene. And that whole aspect of the meeting above the convenience store characters reminded me of the cult in this film, even though Lynch portrays it in a more obviously a surreal fashion. I don't think it's not far-fetched to say there was something of an influence going on there. Yeah, I'm okay, thank you. I'm all right. Not bad, thanks. How are you doing? I've never really watched anime really or anything like that. It's myself, but I hope you enjoy it, of course. So I don't know. It's just seeing this kind of thing online, and it comes up as Mark Frost as director, and then it shows Twin Peaks prominently there. It shows, the limited event series from 2017 and the first season. So he didn't, of course, direct any episode of The Return. None of that was directed by Frost, but he wrote it. He was a co-writer with Lynch, so they wrote that themselves together. But he did, of course, direct the final episode of the first season, which many people are fans of, and thought he brought kind of fast-paced, quality to that, and very enjoyable final episode. Did it very well. So, I think on that alone, on that episode alone, it shows that Frost has what it takes to direct something very, very well. An episode of Twin Peaks. I'd have to watch Storyville again, the film, to see how that was. But I think that's a different thing altogether. Then, of course, something like Hill Street Blues was a completely different kind of show to Twin Peaks. But I know he wrote a lot of Hill Street Blues, but I don't know if he directed an episode or anything. But regardless, as I see it anyway, I think that Frost has got what it takes to be a director. And my own view is that Mark Frost is Twin Peaks, certainly now. And that doesn't bother me in the slightest. Like that could be a really good thing, in the balance of things, and it was something that I kind of thought, okay, all right, I understand this to a degree, but like Lynch saying he's going to direct all 18 parts of The Return, when that was announced, and when he took it from when they kind of extended it from 9 episodes to 18, I was like, and then Lynch was going to direct every one of them. I sort of thought, okay, I understand that he wants to make it very much his own thing, and not leave any room for confusion in that sense of having anyone else in there directing alongside him or other directors like the original show, But I suppose my initial feeling was that it could have been fine if the 2017 series had been only partially directed by Lynch. Well, I would say probably at least half of the episodes were by Lynch, at least, but if there'd been other directors, then that would have been fine by me as well, because it just would have brought in a little bit of something different, a little bit of something extra, a bit of variety. You would see the shift between Lynch's style and then someone else who might be either a little bit more just average style, pedestrian, or just not as interesting style as Lynch, but that could have been a sort of a good contrast in that sense, and maybe we would have appreciated Lynch's actual episodes more in that sense through the contrast, comparing the different style. But of course, with Lynch directing every episode, it could be argued maybe that's like almost a bit too much, of Lynch, too much Lynch, spoils the broth or something. But so, I mean, obviously I'm just sort of like speculating on things that never happened, but that was how I saw it anyway. I'm not really a sort of, I really appreciate Lynch and like his work and enjoyed The Return throughout its entire run, but I'm not like a kind of complete zealot for Lynch, like saying that he's the best director who ever lived, and that that anything he directs is the best version of Twin Peaks ever. He's just making Lynch's own version of Twin Peaks, and I enjoyed that in the original show as well, where you had obviously only a few episodes directed by Lynch overall, and then Fire Walk with Me. And so, sorry about my voice. Yeah, it's just it was good how Lynch just kind of popped up now and again to bring the his brilliance in, and I don't know if maybe his light shone that bit brighter because it was not throughout the entire thing. He wasn't straining himself. He wasn't straining himself to direct every episode, which he did with The Return, of course, and which led to him sort of having these mini disputes, which we saw behind the scenes, saying, why can't we stay in this particular location for longer? Why is it limited to 2 days, or why do we have to get everything on this Great Northern Ben's room set and everything? We have to finish this all within the next day. I think he felt obviously really pushed and rushed at that point, but it would have been different, obviously, I imagine, if he was only directing, say, half of the episode or something. Then it wouldn't have been so strained in that sense. Will Graham says, I rewatched On the Air recently. I just find it hilarious Frost and Lynch tried to make this a series, especially when they were probably on thin ice with the network. Yeah, I think I found one of the reasonable, good quality uploads of that on archive.org. And the last episode of it, episode 7, which wasn't even shown on TV in the US, it was in the UK and other places, but that last episode is directed by Jack Fisk, but written by Bob Engels and Lynch, who of course also wrote the Fire Walk with Me. So I mean, I think it's a really funny final episode and well directed as well by Jack Fisk. There's really nothing about it which would make you think this isn't directed by Lynch, to be fair. But obviously, him writing it helps, and a lot of the jokes in it and the stuff concerning the hipsters and the woman dancing with the shoes and the shoe fetishism, talking about the smell of mink oil on the shoes as well and stuff. I found it pretty hilarious. So yeah, I think the stuff I was talking about with regards to Frost and Twin Peaks in the past and stuff, I would see it as being entirely possible that we could have something else from the Twin Peaks world directed by Mark Frost. Really, I mean, you could look at it purely on the basis of balance in the terms of, Lynch directed the entirety of The Return, and then so why couldn't kind of Frost take the reins, in a separate new thing, even now, and take his own time to direct something, maybe alongside a few other people, but when you try and gauge interest in that kind of an idea online, on Facebook or something like the Tulpa Forum or wherever, or even Reddit, I suppose, then you immediately get the reactions of the kind of really the people who idolize Lynch, and they're like, hey, no Twin Peaks, no David Lynch equals no Twin Peaks, and I just find that, they're saying the same thing as when Lynch stepped back and said he didn't want to direct The Return because he wasn't being given enough budget or episodes, etc., and so then he came back on board, though, and that's not the same situation as what I'm describing now, with obviously the death of Lynch and everything. I don't think that it's disrespectful to in any way continue Twin Peaks at this point, or it means that it will be a toned down or weaker version of it or anything like that. I mean, if they did something and they came back and there was just 4 episodes or something of a new Twin Peaks, then I'm sure that would be accepted for what it was. I mean, critics and fans, etc., could respond in many different ways, but I mean, such a thing could surely be viewed as a sort of a loving tribute, and why does it have to be anything else, really? It's I mean, I can imagine that Mark Frost suddenly announcing, yeah, we're going to do 18 episodes of a follow-on to Twin Peaks: The Return, then all directed by Mark Frost, then that people could react in a kind of differing ways to that, strongly saying, well, this is not Twin Peaks if it's not got any involvement from Lynch, that kind of thing. But that's rather an extreme possibility, and one which I can't really imagine any funding being necessarily there, really, in the same way that something that involved Lynch, would get the funding as it did with The Return. But I'm not really exactly sure. All that Frost has said is, in terms of any of the world of Twin Peaks, really, he would have to think long and hard about it, and that to me is him talking about something more than just a novelization or another book based upon Twin Peaks. It's a bit more of that world than just writing, and so Twin Peaks is a visual thing after all, really. Yeah, Frost did say as well in a recent interview that he was comparing his sort of perspective or his worldview. I'm not sure exactly how he meant it, but he said that in terms of maybe on a creative level as well, he was talking, Lynch's view of things was a bit darker than his, which is obviously a bit of a, if you're not talking specifics, what exactly does he mean? But and I'm not really sure, like, if, for instance, Twin Peaks: The Return was that dark overall, but perhaps if he means by dark, he means sort of murky and a bit hard to quite make sense of, and bringing in things like the experiment and the whole Judy thing, and then biting people's heads off coming out of a glass box. That kind of thing is a bit dark. Perhaps the initial scenes of Mr. C are pretty dark, somewhat scary. Yeah, I think the more just the average Twin Peaks fans would always be interested in anything in the Twin Peaks world. I think there's always got to be an element, perhaps, of like Lynch approved this somehow. Otherwise, you can imagine people saying, "Well, this is not truly Twin Peaks if it's just completely going ahead with nothing from Lynch in terms of its creation." But obviously, like, Lynch and Frost spoke and were in communication, writing the entirety of the Twin Peaks: The Return script over a number of years, and the many different things that they discussed, and other things that went into those scripts which were never aired. For instance, there's always that, isn't there? There's that aspect. You can salvage things from that to some degree, even just things they discussed with each other personally. There's a lot there, and watching the Art Life documentary on Lynch, you can see there's one part of it where you can see some handwritten script for The Return on the side, where he was his desk and everything that he's got there, where he was mainly making figures and things connected to his paintings. But people who captured the screen and got that script, turned it around so you could read it. If you actually look at it, the top of the script page mentions something about a bowling alley, and then it goes into a woman is looking at a TV screen, and then what she's watching on the TV screen becomes what is actually happening in reality. And I'm not even sure if that was which character that was, but it's before then it cuts to the scene where Monica Bellucci is there with Lynch in Paris. So it was a bit more the way it was played in the script is probably even more surreal in terms of the going from one thing to another than with less explanation, really. The TV version, the version of The Return we saw, has Cole mentioned that then he has a Monica Bellucci dream to sort of set it up. It doesn't just cut to that immediately, but it could have been either way, really, without a setup. And the whole thing of a woman is watching a TV show, and then what she's watching on the TV show becomes her reality, sounds very similar to things in Inland Empire, perhaps. But I think that kind of scene not being in the return is something of a shame for me, because it's more of a, you know, giving you a bit more of a kind of idea of like, are we watching necessarily a kind of real life event, or true to the screen as such, or are we watching something filtered through someone else's perspective in terms of this whole the return, and are we is it like we're watching a TV screen, and it's sort of coming through somebody else's perspective, who is the dreamer, that kind of idea. But yeah, it also reminded me actually of scenes which are in, but also others which were deleted from Blue Velvet, where a lot of the actual scenes in the film are sort of either foreshadowed or just the similar kind of events are shown, brief shots of just someone going up a set of stairs holding a gun, and things like this, as they're watching a soap opera or whatever. It's Jeffrey's mom just watching TV, and then we have obviously similar scenes going up the stairs or down the stairs from Dorothy's apartment, and then obviously in terms of the later scene with Jeffrey shooting oh my god, I'm having another brain freeze now. Frank, Frank Booth. So I can't even remember where he gets the gun from in that film. Anyway, does he? I'm not sure where the gun is from. Does he find it or what? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of any continuation of Twin Peaks, or in any sense, however many years you go past now, like looking into the future, it would always seem yeah, the main question would be what exactly is going to be in this, in the story, what is going to be happening in this new Twin Peaks. It can't, surely it couldn't just really continue from what we saw at the end of The Return, with the whole Carrie Page and Cooper traveling all the way to Twin Peaks in the car, and then of course the last scene, and I can't really imagine it would be able to carry on in that kind of world exactly, with just continuing their story straight off from the ending. It could be definitely related to that, in the same way that that I'll See You in 25 Years could be related to, from the original show to this. But considering that, that Twin Peaks: The Return has definitely got more than half a foot in the world of the surreal, for me, it would make perfect sense for anything after that then to be a little bit more to have a bit more of a foot in the everyday and the slightly more ordinary aspects of Twin Peaks. Even though it's probably true that the majority of the Black Lodge stuff is, and that kind of lore, or that background as mainly portrayed in the second season of Twin Peaks, the majority of that was actually Mark Frost, not Lynch. Lynch had the initial idea for the Red Room Dream, which was the extended ending for the pilot, and then appeared in episode 2, as Cooper's Dream and everything. But so yeah, I think there's all that side of the lore of the Black Lodge and that kind of side of Twin Peaks, and then the more soap opera detectives ordinary side of it, which I think would be portrayed, brilliantly by Mark Frost if he wanted to do it. And obviously it wouldn't be in 25 years' time, though, if anything was going to happen. And at the end of the day, the very least one might hope for is a, like some other kind of film made for, some film continuation or sort of hour-long special released through a new box set, which would come out in, a few years, when everything is done in 4K, when we get an entirely 4K box set. But, that's, and it could be screened, as a streaming event or something, but that would be a bit of a, well, for me at least, and probably a lot of fans, that could seem a little bit, you'd hope for a bit more than that, maybe, from such a fascinating kind of creative world that, the Twin Peaks world still exists. So it wasn't ended by The Return. I would say that the Twin Peaks: The Return was more of a new, a reopening of the Twin Peaks world in many senses. So, and Lynch said that, that more ideas were calling for him in terms of the Carrie Page idea, etc. I don't know what those were, but he said it was coming with interruptions or something. Interruptions or interference. I'm not sure what he said. Interruptions, probably. But yeah, I think it pretty clearly sums up how I'm not a person who sort of sees everything related to Twin Peaks being, 50-50 Lynch Frost, or like Lynch has to have a big creative part of necessarily, because he's already made such a creative input and creative dent on Twin Peaks. It can't really be denied at this point. So why not make room for the other showrunner, a little bit? And in many ways, talking about the kind of scene in the script of somebody looking at a TV as a sort of moment in the whole, and then they become part of what they see on TV, that kind of idea, or however it was supposed to be written. I mean, whatever Lynch was trying to portray in that. And since it's in Lynch's writing, obviously we know that was Lynch's idea. That kind of thing not being in the actual, in The Return, to me, it backs up a bit of the idea that a lot of The Return it's like we're sort of constantly shifting from one genre or one sort of TV show to another throughout it. We're constantly going from one whole sort of capsule of something that you'd get on TV to another one, in the different setups throughout it, the different locations, skipping about, really. We go from, the initial scenes of Mr. C, and then the scene with the experiment in the New York room and everything. It's almost got a thriller horror aspect to it. And then it skips to where Dougie is and that kind of thing. And it has an almost sitcom flavor to it at times, And then there's the stuff with Chantel and Hutch, that kind of thing. Even though I wasn't a massive fan of their scenes and stuff, it was like another side plot, another TV show, happening alongside the Las Vegas scenes, etc. The Twin Peaks, scenes as well seemed like someone was skipping over channels, going from one thing to another. It was all just all over the place, really. And in many ways, that made it enjoyable throughout the 18 hours, but it's certainly disjointed. So, yeah, as disjointed as Inland Empire, almost, maybe. So anyway, thank you for anyone who was watching today, and hopefully I'll be back soon and with something else to talk about. So thanks for watching, and all the best from me for now. I'll be seeing you in the trees.